Thank you. I'm happy to be here and appreciative of the invitation actually to talk to you about LANDFIRE today. So, key thing that I want to start out with is data. This is really what LANDFIRE is about, and you know, we are really data poor. Probably in a lot of examples you've seen, everything that drives our decisions is data. So, really want to focus on multiple pieces for multiple uses. You see the examples up here from harvest information to vegetation, grazing type information. LANDFIRE is definitely a data set that can help with that. LANDFIRE's been around for 10 years. Actually, in 2014, we celebrated the 10th year anniversary. So it's a program within the Department of Interior and the United States USDA Forest Service. Principal partners are with USGS out of the Aros Data Center in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and then the Missoula Fire Sciences Lab in Montana, as well as the Nature Conservancy. They're a key partner in this effort. So some of you might have said, LANDFIRE. Maybe you hadn't heard about it before, and you said, why are we going to talk about fire? All right. The key thing that I really want to impress upon your mind is that LANDFIRE is not just a fire data set. A lot of people get hung up on that word fire, and they immediately think, that's just for fire. And so if there's one takeaway that I really want you to walk out of here, short answer is it's land and fire. And some examples of that from the land cover data and information that's within LANDFIRE, used everything from all the way down, like with wildlife and habitat information. And of course, it does include your fuels information to active fire management. And maybe make a case in point. Those of you that are familiar with wordles and things like that. We went through an exercise with our documentation and our operations and maintenance plan. And you can see some of the keywords that come out of that is vegetation, data. So don't get hung up in thinking, well, okay, it's just a fire thing, because there's so much more. Kind of like, friends and neighbors. Don't judge the cover of the book until you actually dive into the book and understand what is there. I really want to stress this. I'm big on partners and collaboration, and that's one of the strengths that LANDFIRE brings, because this is an interdepartmental, interagency effort. When I first started, the chief of the Forest Service was like, "This is going to be successful." Sometimes collaboration is really hard. Communication is hard, but it has really turned out to be a positive strength. When one partner is not able to do something, the other partner is able to step in, and it's proven to be extremely successful. So a few that I just really want to highlight. First is the forest inventory analysis. We have a memorandum of understanding, so we incorporate that data within LANDFIRE. Also, GAP and LANDFIRE are like brothers and sisters relative to the classification that we've used. GAP, as many of you are aware, focused on some areas and then did some regas, but they were never successful within mapping the entire United States. So LANDFIRE has been able to do that, and we have signed a memorandum of understanding with GAP to move forward. And this year, we're actually integrating our staff and resources on our mapping efforts. The National Agricultural Statistics Service, NASS, huge in helping us with agricultural land and classification of those lands relative to not only the vegetation, but their relationship to fire and the dynamics of fuels. And then the National Land Cover Database, that Colin Homer's here, and I'll visit with you here in a bit, but really very critical and important partner as LANDFIRE started and as we continue. But we're working now on a collaborative remap strategy as we move forward with the multi-resolution land consortium. And Colin will talk a little bit more about some of the fractional veg that he's working on. Very key important that we are interested in and helping kind of refine that classification. And then Bureau of Land Management, kind of two parts here. With the consortium, Matt Vogel and company have really stepped up to the plate, taking on that shrub, rangeland, grassland representation within the consortium. And so that's really going to further strengthen and improve the quality of the data there. And then, of course, you've been hearing AIM. You're probably tired of hearing that. We'll touch on something about that, but very important partnership for LANDFIRE. Landsat, remote sensing, it's the ship on which we are floating. It's every picnic that we drive from. So lens, that's very important. And then I cannot, end without mentioning the Natural Resource Conservation Service. My big analogy with this is, and Ronnie Lassard, Veronica was here earlier this morning, probably talked to you a little bit about this, but I've been fishing NRCS for a long time, back 10 years. It's like this big trout that we've been trying to catch, and I've had to be really careful in, trying to manage that. We are at the cusp of signing a memorandum with NRCS for the interactive, which to me is a huge leap forward. And actually did a pilot in the state of Montana, and the results of that were very positive. So partnerships, and if you want to be a partner, come talk to me because I'd love to be your partner. So LANDFIRE, I talked about data at the beginning. This is all lands. Every portion of the United States is covered. We map everyone's ownership, regardless of who you are and what you represent. And in the most recent times, we've actually added the territories as well. So, we're looking at, not only 50 states, but the insular area territories. Just to show you kind of a breakdown, I'm using some of the map stones tied with the Multi-Resolution Land Consortium and LCD, and then some geographic areas and how we coordinate the data relative to Landsat and come up with the map for that. Products, LANDFIRE produces about 20 geospatial products, 20 plus, and it's not only just spatial. There are some reference point data. Talk a little bit more about that. There's also some state and transition databases and models with LANDFIRE that cuts with biophysical settings, environmental site potential. And the major categories you can see is, of course, the reference data, plots, and polygon. Landscape change is a big part of monitoring. So we need to account for that change over time. I'll show you some examples later of that. And then vegetation, really important from type, cover, height. You need that type of data information to help inform your decisions. Then, of course, fuel. There is that fire component to LANDFIRE. Also some fire regime information, and then just some topographic data. So to dive a little bit more into the vegetation data, from environmental site potential and biophysical setting, you're aware of ecological site descriptions, but ecological sites are not everywhere. And so we are working, currently working in kind of the Wisconsin, Minnesota central states on a connection relationship between biophysical setting and environmental site descriptions, and hope to be able to expand upon that. And there's some earlier work done in kind of comparing and contrasting the two. And environmental sites and biophysical settings is at a little bit higher level, and then ecological sites is at a finer level. But we feel like that there's some opportunities there that we can work and make some connections. This is a potential future innovation, and we're hopeful that that work will lead us into being able to do something on the national extent. Maybe another just really quick story. When I started with LANDFIRE back in 2004, it's one thing to map the nation. Check, did that. Another thing to actually, update it and provide some products that, show current conditions. And so to me, that has been the real true success of LANDFIRE, as we have been. It's updated every 2 years, and we are now in the process of working on a decadal remap, and that will be coming with this LANDFIRE remap. But you can see we've been doing a number of updates over the years. Plot data, polygon data. Folks have heard me say before, but we really live and die by plots. It's the key component for LANDFIRE. Remote sensing is important, but without that field data to help, ground validate what you are seeing, can't do it. LANDFIRE has over 800,000 field points across the nation. It may sound like a lot, but really, not that much when you start looking at doing quality assessments and agreement assessments. LANDFIRE has done that. And from a user versus a producer's accuracy, the quality of that varies based on the vegetation type and the number of plots that we have to use to help with that classification. Polygons are very important when we start looking at disturbance across the landscape and have, roughly over 600,000 different polygons that are included on that. We're collecting that. So we're actually just finished up a data call collection in January. If you're aware of data, let us know, because we may be able to incorporate that into our processes. So talk a little bit about AIM, but this is, it's really the bread and butter of what we are looking at, because it's that field data. And being able to have data that can be used, collected once but used multiple times, and helping inform everything from a local all the way up to regional and national scale is very, very important. So to talk a little bit more about change detection, in the most recent updates for LANDFIRE, we've been looking at the spatial polygons where harvest treatments may have occurred, fires may have occurred, to go back in and update the vegetation characteristics for high cover, and then also provide an updated fire behavior field model with those data. And this just shows you kind of a representation that we not only are looking at it from just plop a polygon on there, but we're also getting varying degrees of severity or the magnitude of change within those polygons, so that we can appropriately update the vegetation. And some new products LANDFIRE has just rolled out are some vegetation magnitude transition data sets. But those data sets are walk through in a serial state to help an individual understand that, okay, if I had vegetation at experience this type of a disturbance, what vegetation may I have year 5, year 10, et cetera. And there's a bunch of lookup tables that individuals are able to work through, and you could take it yourself and say, hey, I have this disturbance using those vegetation transition grids, and update an area for your local area. Focus a little bit about applications. These data are very important for fire. We have a system called the Wildland Fire Decision Support System, and what that does is it integrates not only the land characteristics, but also a lot of the other values such as oil, gas, electricity, urban areas. And here's an example. One of our incident commanders, Tim Sexton, really said, these data help save millions of dollars in thinking about the tactical strategies that are implemented relative to fires. And, with these types of events, there's a lot of political concern and interest, but having these data and, using the interrelationship of these data, in a geospatial geospatial graphic information system, you're able to look at the intersection of these points to help inform the decisions. Another application is a burn probability map. This has been really helpful in looking at, what is that potential of flame conditions, flame length. Very important in tying it into risk assessments, and it's actually part of the Bureau of Land Management's fire basis assessment team in thinking about the landscape relative to sage grouse and other threats. And then focusing on some BLM type example. The LANDFIRE-based data with the vegetation type and biophysical settings are very important. As I mentioned, it's updated biannually, so you're able to get more current information. And that consistent, repeatable measures are really helpful in monitoring changes over time and helping with incidents or situations like sage grouse. And then just a few other examples. We actually have a map called WAM, which is the Web Hosted Application Map, just showing across the country where LANDFIRE is being used and the types of examples. Here's just a few. With the Bureau of Land Management and their rapid ecoregional assessments, it's been really helpful. In this particular instance, with the Arizona solar regional mitigation efforts that was going on in Idaho and that Intermountain West with the bighorn sheep analysis, as well as pollinators actually here in the state of California. So the data are used in a plethora of applications. Timeline, I talked about the future. We're going to be working on the next LANDFIRE update, 2014. We're in the process of doing that now. And then this collaborative remap beginning in the 2016 timeframe. And then last but not least, it's all about you. Okay? we're in this to provide data for the user community, so you have what you need to help inform your decisions. And there's a lot of opportunities there to contribute data, to find help, as well as just general information about LANDFIRE. And with that, I will close and take any questions that you have. Thank you. Thank you. Maybe just a comment on that. We do provide, on LANDFIRE.gov, you can go and actually pull down some of the publicly available data. So that is a deliverable. Some of those are confidential, just like FIA, so we're not able to share that information. But there is a large, set of data that is publicly available. So if you're looking for point data, polygon data, we have that to be used in other applications beyond just the spatial products of LANDFIRE. Good comment. I love the applause from behind. Okay, thank you very much. I'll be here later, and if there's additional questions at the end, I'm happy to tie in with anybody. Thank you.